Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Welcome, everyone, to the P.A.S. Report podcast. As your host, Nick Giordano, I am glad you could join me. Make sure you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends. I have a phenomenal guest. I try and make sense out of the senseless, but it's getting more and more difficult to do, given everything that's going on out there. So I'm bringing on someone that's been on before, one of the favorite guests of my audience, Miranda Devine, New York Post columnist, actual journalist that does real journalism. And she's the author of a new book that's coming out in September, The Big Guy, How a President and His Son Sold Out America. Miranda, welcome to the program. How are you?
Thanks, Nick. Great to be with you.
Well, I always enjoy talking to you because, I mean, you've been on top of the Biden story forever, it seems like. And I know that he just became president 4 years ago. Now he's leaving the president. I don't even know if he's still president. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. But as far as you see in your book, did you have to now add a new chapter for the next grift stage of his life?
Not really, because I always had in mind that he would not be the nominee by the time November came around. I did think that he'd got this far, that he was going to make it, but I think just in the nick of time, they've replaced him with Kamala, or however you pronounce her name. And I guess that means that the voters won't have too much time to vet her, which is exactly what the Democrats want. So, you know, the book is really about the cover-up and the protection racket around Joe Biden throughout pretty much his entire career. And it's about how the deep state, particularly the CIA and the FBI, the DOJ, the IRS, all conspired to protect him and his family's grift from ever coming to light, and ensuring that he won the 2020 election. And I mean, it's quite staggering, the role of the CIA all the way along, quite frightening. And, you know, because it's obviously a clandestine organization, you just have to look for the sort of the shadows and the fingerprints. And there is so much of it in whether it's the investigation of Hunter Biden in Delaware that was hobbled and slow-walked and obstructed. The CIA got involved there. Or the most famous case was the Dirty 51 letter that was written by 51 former intelligence officials, but most of them, 41 of them, were CIA, and 5 of them were former CIA directors or acting directors. And they lied in that letter and said that Hunter Biden's laptop, and therefore our stories, was a Russian disinformation operation. And they wrote it, now we know, at the behest of the Biden campaign, and particularly Antony Blinken, now Secretary of State, who's doing a terrible job. And he was then a senior campaign manager in the Biden campaign. He's very tied at the hip to Joe Biden, who's been his mentor for many years. And he was the one who instigated that letter being written, getting Mike Morell, former acting director of the CIA, who actually thought that he had a chance of being the director of the CIA under Joe Biden. Even though he embarrassed himself, he basically sold out the country by writing that letter and getting his colleagues to sign. Sorry for him, he never got that big role, so it was all for nothing.
Well, it's so frustrating because, you know, it must be bittersweet for you, because at first it was all Russian disinformation. Well, now it proves you were actually right. And it was a huge scandal. And when you look at President Biden over the course of the last 4 years, I mean, his cognitive decline was apparent to anyone that was just paying attention and watching. I mean, the second he was shaking hands with a ghost that wasn't there should have been a big red flag that, hey, something's going on. When it comes to the CIA, the FBI, every single government agency and all the top level officials that interacted with them, is there any chance that they didn't know that he was in cognitive decline?
No chance at all. I mean, if it's obvious to just the average citizen in January of 2020, when Joe Biden showed up in Iowa and New Hampshire, just completely befuddled, having to have his staff haul around a teleprompter to these tiny town halls that every other candidate in the race could just do their stump speech in their sleep. And there was Joe Biden having to bumblingly read out these lines. I would just catch the eyes of people in the audience and they would just be wide-eyed and shaking their head. The guy was shot back in January of 2020. And thanks to COVID, the campaign managed to hide him. Thanks to Jim Clyburn, even though he came in fourth or fifth in Iowa and New Hampshire, Jim Clyburn, who was the sort of godfather of the black vote in the Democratic Party, managed to drag him over the line there in the Carolinas. And the rest was history. He beat Donald Trump, who had been badly damaged by the COVID lockdowns. And I think also his own sort of clumsy demeanor in front of Anthony Fauci at those daily news conferences, which was not reassuring. And the fact that he was sort of being undermined behind his back by the likes of Fauci.
Yeah, I mean, it was terrible, but you look how they propped him up over the last 4 years, and not just the government officials. I think they're the worst bunch because they're supposed to be bureaucrats that fulfill missions of agencies and don't put their finger on the political scale, but yet that's what they've been doing. They interfered in 2020 by silencing and censoring you. And we already see the fingerprints that are happening again. We just had the intelligence community come out a couple of weeks ago talking about that Russia is looking to manipulate our election system. So they're already at it again. But what I want to know is, you saw the president's speech last night. What did you make of it?
I just thought it was very on brand. It was completely self-aggrandizing and delusional. I mean, extraordinarily, he said in there that we've closed the border, we've stemmed the border problem, that border crossings are now lower than they were when Donald Trump was there. That is what he's claiming. It is
No new wars.
Breathtaking lie. Oh, and that was the other thing. Exactly. He's the only president in, X years that hasn't had a war started on his watch. And he also said hilariously that, I promised you I'd always be straight with you and always tell you the truth. And I thought, wow, has there been a single day in his presidency that he hasn't told a lie? This man, honestly, I really find that it's a form of mental illness, this kind of congenital pathological lying. And whether it's a lie to get himself out of trouble, or often he tells just self-aggrandizing lies, the corn pop style lies about how he was brought up in the black church, or he was a civil rights leader, or, any number of things. He was top of his class. He's done this all his life. I mean, he plagiarized. That's part of that dishonesty that sort of should have disqualified him from ever becoming president. But he was installed because he's such a malleable puppet. He's so easily manipulated and flattered. And really what he cares about, I mean, he and his family are just grifters. That really is, with a capital G, that is what defines him, his vice presidency, his entire political career. And, they got tens of millions of dollars for the family from China and Russia and Ukraine and so on. I mean, really small money when you think about it, that he really did sell out the country.
And I love how they portray him as such a humble man, that he's stepping down from power, that he is the next George Washington, as Fauci was to science. Joe Biden is to George Washington. What an insult to Washington. Don't disrespect him like that. And let's be honest, the party bosses, they're like jackals. They're the ones that forced him out. It's not a secret, even though people want to deny it. And God only knows what the payoff was to get him to step down from the race. But Miranda, I mean, he went missing for a period of time, and I want to ask you about that when we get back from this quick break. So everyone hang tight. We'll be right back. Are you prepared for the unexpected? As a former emergency manager, being prepared is not a choice, it's a necessity, and that's where the wellness company comes in. Imagine having the peace of mind that you're equipped to handle any medical crisis, from tick bites to the latest pandemic. The wellness company's medical emergency kit is your lifeline, packed with essential medications like ivermectin, emergency antibiotics, antivirals, and more. This kit is your ultimate preparedness solution. The wellness company's team of renowned medical professionals, including Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. James Thorpe, Dr. Harvey Risch, Dr. Drew Pinsky, and more. They are truth-seeking doctors, and they have designed a kit that sets the gold standard for safety and prevention. Don't wait for the next crisis to strike. Visit twc.health/PAS and use promo code PAS for an exclusive 10% discount just for being a listener of this show. Prepare today, rest easy tomorrow. Use code PAS at checkout. Welcome back, everyone. So, Joe Biden is forced to step out of the race. He goes missing for a period of literally a week. It was like 7 days before anyone saw him publicly. As a journalist, do you have any indication about what really went on behind the scenes? Like, what really changed? I mean, on Saturday, he comes out there and he says that he's running and he's not changing his mind. Just a week before, he stated that the only way he'll drop out of the race if God himself comes out and tells him not to run. And maybe that happened. We don't know. But maybe it happened over the course of the 7 days. But do you have any information about why he finally relented? What went on behind the scenes that made him finally relent to the party boss demands?
Again, like the CIA, all we have is sort of shadows and fingerprints, but there are quite a few. And I think when you look at Barack Obama's behavior towards Joe Biden at that Hollywood fundraiser just a few days before the debate. And this was after Joe Biden had come back from the G7, where he'd been behaving in such a peculiar way, meandering around the place and having to be dragged back into line by, Giorgia Meloni of Italy and everybody in the international press.
The cheap fakes,
exactly. And that video of that was called a cheap fake of Obama sort of grabbing Joe Biden by the hand when he seemed to be frozen like a deer in the spotlight, and then leading him off stage like a child with his hand on his back, patting him. I mean, he could have been more subtle. Obama is an extremely subtle man. That was a deliberate show to signal to everybody who was important, donors and all the grandees in the Democratic Party, that this was the end for Joe Biden. This was like in The Godfather, when the Godfather just gives a nod of the head and the message goes out to all the capos that it's the end for Joe Biden. He has to go, they're going to take him fishing. And it took Biden quite a while, especially because he had Jill Biden, but more importantly, Hunter Biden was with him in the White House, attending meetings, giving him advice, strengthening his resolve to stay on. And I was told by an intimate of the family that the sort of public humiliation that was it conducted at the beginning was having the opposite effect on Joe Biden. It just got his Irish up, made him more stubborn, and made him dig in his heels even more. And Nancy Pelosi then was saying, well, we're going to do this either the easy way or the hard way. They gave him 3 weeks of the easy way. And then, what this family intimate also told me that, if only they would go behind the scenes and do a deal with him, that would be a much better way of managing things. And so I think that's what they did. And the deal, obviously, part of it was that for the next 6 months, Joe Biden gets basically an everlasting eulogy about what a wonderful man he is and how he put country before party and before himself. He's so selfless. I mean, you see the likes of Joy Reid waxing lyrical now, and the pet historians like John Meacham, supposed historian, and Beschloss, just sycophantically salivating all over MSNBC and CNN about what a great statesman Joe Biden is, unprecedented in history, and what a wonderful presidency he had. So that's part of it. And then there'll be a financial reward as well. We don't know what form that will take, but, there are a lot of very deep-pocketed Democrat donors. So it could be a Netflix deal, it could be a book deal, tens of millions of dollars entailed in that, where the family gets looked after. And then on top of that, I was told by Rod Blagojevich, whose name I never get right, I'm sorry, Blago, who's a former Obama guy, went to jail for Obama. He knows how the Democratic Party works, and he says, well, there'll likely be a presidential library like the $200 million one that's being built on the shores of Lake Michigan for Obama right now. And with that presidential library would come jobs for life at probably, $500,000 salaries for Hunter and Aunt Val and Uncle Jim and all the grandchildren.
The grift really is so shameful, and it's amazing. I've never seen anything like it. But Miranda, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, I want to ask you about what's next. What do you think is next, not just for Biden, but also for Kamala Harris and the Democrat Party as a whole? Everyone hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So, Miranda, do you think after President Biden's speech that he came out and said that he's not running for office, do you think that was his last hurrah? Do you think that we're going to see much of him over the course of the next 6 months? Or do you think this is his walk off into the sunset and they're going to extremely limit his public appearances and his interaction with the press?
I think they'll limit him. And I think what he'll do is go on a lot of holidays. So he already is the president with the most holidays, I think, on record. And so there'll be lots more long weekends in Rehoboth and back in the estate in Delaware. There'll be Camp David. I think he's off to Camp David this weekend. And Jill Biden's off, jetted off on Air Force One to Paris for the Olympics. And she brought along 5 extended family members, all of Hunter's children, Naomi's husband, and then another grandchild. It's, Air Force One is going to be getting an extreme workout as they go on these sort of holidays of a lifetime. They will cram in as much grift as they can in the next 6 months, and the taxpayer will be paying.
You brought up some of the journalists and historians, and I unfortunately, they're a blight on your profession, because it really is astonishing that these are the same people that were telling us just a couple of months ago that this is the best Biden ever, that he's never been better, that he's sharp as a whip, and they all lied. They were exposed. They throw him overboard. You have the president giving a speech, and obviously it's the Democrat platform for 2024 about democracy. Yeah. That not a single voter voted for Kamala Harris, and she was inserted by the party elites, the party bosses. But what does it say about our press that they are now literally, and this is not exaggeration, they are literally going back into their stories. So they propped up Joe Biden. Now they're going back into their old stories about the vice president of the United States and actually editing those stories, disavowing what they said just 3 years ago, for example, like the borders are. They're changing it. What's going on with the state of journalism? I mean, this is like Orwell 1984, and I have the quote up. Every record has been destroyed or falsified, every book rewritten, every picture repainted, every statue and street and building renamed, every date altered. And the process is continuing day by day, minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except the endless present in which the party is always right. How true does that ring?
How prescient is that? And, of course, Orwell is talking about totalitarian societies, and that urge in humans is as old as mankind. This control craze for power has overtaken, sadly, all the institutions, including the Fourth Estate, journalism, which, really is crucial to keep democracy working in working order. And now, much of the media has just become a propaganda outfit. And as you say, Axios and others going back into 3-year-old stories and erasing the truth, which was that Joe Biden appointed Kamala Harris as the border czar. She was supposed to fix the border. There are so many video clips of her. And, I must say, if it weren't for Elon Musk buying Twitter and allowing, free speech to flourish there, we probably wouldn't even know about that. It's on Twitter that these lies and deceptions are being unveiled. And, that is a vulnerability before the election. And I can't imagine that the deep state, the Democratic Party, whoever is pulling these strings, is going to allow Elon Musk to keep that little funnel into the truth and reality open for much longer. I don't know what they will do. He does have a lot of money and he's protected, but that is really a sore point for them. And I don't know. I mean, maybe you have an idea about what they'll do.
Well, the thing is, I don't know if they need to do anything. And what I mean by that is if we just look at how a large segment of ordinary Democrats, I'm talking about the ordinary people, like if Republicans did this with Trump, if Trump really was, cognitively unable to do the job and unfit and all that stuff, I would be extraordinarily mad and feel like the media that I trusted abandoned me, and
Yeah.
I can no longer trust and watch them, and I can't listen to them anymore. But it amazes me how many people actually believe that there was no cognitive decline, that he was fine. Then when it was exposed, they didn't turn against these media outlets. They didn't call for accountability. They just threw Biden under the bus. Even the other day, when we look at how Kamala Harris was inserted, I put out a couple of posts and I get all these Democrats that were saying, oh, well, should we support her? And they just go along with it. So I don't know that if the intel community needs to do anything, because essentially they already control the narrative pretty much. And if you look at everything that they've done, I go back to the Homeland Security CISA director, Jen Easterly, where she said, cognitive infrastructure. She wants to put
Yes.
cognitive infrastructure under critical infrastructure protection, which I did a lot of work with, because controlling thoughts and opinions in the 21st century is essential for misinformation, disinformation. And then she said malinformation, which nobody focuses on. Malinformation is information that is true, but can be deemed that it causes harm.
Mm.
And so I don't know if they need to do anything anymore. It seems like, you have a bunch of useful lemmings out there that will just go along with whatever the government narrative is. Kamala Harris has now been elevated. She's almost like a goddess.
Yes.
Meanwhile, 3 years ago, they were saying how there was such disdain in the White House for her, how she was incompetent, how Joe Biden feels he made the wrong pick. Now she's someone that could do no wrong.
Yeah, the sheeple. I do think, though, there is a limit to their narrative crafting because, Kamala Harris herself, we saw back in, she didn't even make it to 2020, actually, but in 2019, she had to abandon her campaign, having sort of been launched with great fanfare, just as now, because on paper, she looks good. Former prosecutor, she's attractive, she's youngish, she's in her late 50s. And she just, as soon as people sort of got a glimpse of her and got to really see how insincere and inauthentic and just fake she is, it's a visceral reaction. And her numbers plummeted to something like 2% before she had to pull out. I do think particularly women are turned off by her. There might be this rah-rah talk around the image of Kamala Harris, which is sort of attractive and bubbly and TikToky and, the brat, the queen brat and all this nonsense. But it's so unreal and fake. And women, I think, pick this up in other women when there's a fakery and an insincerity, someone who laughs and pretends they're your best friend and then turns around and steals your husband, that sort of thing. I think women are attuned to that kind of woman as an enemy. She's really a man's woman and is flirtatious with men. So maybe men will be less inclined to go for her, but more inclined, to go for her than women. But the Democratic Party has a problem with men anyway. And so I think this is really going to be a gendered election. And I don't think they can count. They're going to make it a race and sex election, try to attack Donald Trump on that score, which, he's supposedly vulnerable on. But I don't think it will work because I don't think that men are going to trust the Democratic Party. They see it as a party that's run by a bunch of narky women who are always bossing them around and telling them what to do, sort of a bunch of Karens. and she is a repellent to most women. So I think that, you know, they're trying to put lipstick on a pig. And I think ultimately, no matter how good they are at crafting their narratives, no matter how much Hollywood razzmatazz they wrap around her, the true self does come through. And I think personalities in presidential elections are important. And as long as Donald Trump doesn't blow himself up by, you know, put his foot in his mouth or whatever, he's currently tracking pretty well, and I think a much more disciplined campaign than before. And you know, men in particular really admired his courage under fire, that defiant fist in the air with blood on his face after the assassination attempt. Grudgingly, young men in particular really admire that kind of masculine courage, which has been so demonized and you know, attempted to be stamped out in this country. You know, men still crave that, and I think women do as well.
I think women do too.
Women do it too,
They
to feel
real
safe.
men.
Yeah, to feel safe.
Yeah, and well, now apparently, according to the media, you have them implying, well, Trump wasn't really hitting his ear with the bullet.
Yeah.
They're implying as if, you know, the few centimeters to blow his head off, since he didn't get his head blown off, it's not a big deal. It really is disgraceful. But I think you're right about Kamala. I think that the more people see her, and that's her biggest problem, the more she's out there, the more people are turned off by her. And do you think that the final story is written? I mean, if her numbers crater, let's just say 2 weeks from now, do you think that the Democrats would be so brazen as to replace her as well?
Yes. I mean, rules don't apply to them, and they project, they're psychological projectors about everything. All the sins that they commit, they pretend that the other side is committing. They talk non-stop about democracy, and yet they're the least democratic party you could find. I mean, they rule with an iron fist. They will, you know, make or break leaders as suits them. You know, if Kamala's not going well, they need to win at any cost. They will not lose nobly.
They're
so
ruthless.
whatever it takes, and whether that's riots on the street, whatever it takes, they will do it. And it's going to be a very ugly 6 months, or actually 4 months, but 6 months until Joe Biden is finally out of the White House, if he stays on that long. And you know, I would think after the election, if by some miracle Donald Trump does manage to get it enough of a landslide to make any, you know, ballot fixing moot, I think that the period between November and January 20 would also be a very violent and frightening period.
Oh, without a doubt. I completely agree with you. And listen, I mean, we've seen it, that there's never any accountability. No one is your book. I mean, the amount you've exposed about the criminal enterprise, the Biden family business is truly remarkable. Everyone needs to pre-order the big guy, because I could tell you now, it's a fascinating book, and you'll learn a lot. It's really enjoyable. Miranda, always a pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks, Nick. Great to talk to you too.
Very good.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.